How is everybody doing today? Welcome to Hurdlers of Adversity, Inspirers and Maximizers of Pivotal Moments. My name is John Register. I am your host, introducing you to these amazing individuals who just blow me away. And I know that they've been blowing you away as well. And we want to just kind of get you in the room where it happens, the room where it happens, the room where it happens, because this is going to be a great conversation today. I have a wonderful, I think she's younger than I am, but she's kind of a mentor as well. And it's going to be a great conversation, I know, because she has just been to the mountaintop and back and has just had a great life experience. And I just can't wait to introduce each and every one of you to her. I see Lynn is on. I know it's raining out there. I hope you all are safe in Charlotte. Lynn, thank you so much. Always the first one on. You are always winning the gold medal and the sprint to being on for us. So I really appreciate you. I hope you had a chance to see some of the other things that have been going on, like during Veterans Day and some of the other programs that happened with our friend that I was presenting for a little bit earlier this week. So I had a lot of presentations, and my voice, as you can hear, is kind of a little raspy right now because of all the presentations I have had. So thank you for being on from rainy North Carolina today. So where's everybody else from? Ben Lake. Ben Lake, thank you for being on as well. And you are out there. Thank you so much. If you're out there, please tag somebody, share the stream with somebody, because, like I said, we have a really great, powerful show for you all today. So thank you as well for coming on. So we have, you see me looking this way, I'm looking at all the comments that are coming in. Sometimes I type over there as well. Stacy Bush is on. Great to see you, Stacy. Wonderful to see you as well. Yes, bringing us the room where it happens. That's exactly right. Little Lin-Manuel there in Hamilton. So I really appreciate you all sticking it out and coming in. We're streamlining. We're going really quick towards the end of the year, if you can believe that. There are some things that are coming up that I'm going to share with you. So stick around to the end, because I have some important updates to share with all of you. Mary Ellen Whitney, Albany, New York Stride. Yes, thank you so much for being on, Mary Ellen. I appreciate you being there. So we have everybody starting to come into the room. So invite your families. I know on the East Coast, you're shutting it down. Our guest is on the East Coast right now. But just get your families around. Get some coffee, get some popcorn. We got a really great show for you today. We always have great shows for you, but this one is really special, really dear heart of mine that's going to be with us. So, just for the show, all the time, I always kind of share with you who I am, why we're here, because I don't know who's going to watch this later on. So I just want to make sure whenever they watch, they kind of understand who I am and what we're doing here. Well, on May the 17th, 1994, I was one of the fastest hurdlers in the United States of America. I was on my way to the Olympic Games. USA Track and Field News had just picked me to be a favorite for to make the team in the 400-meter hurdles. I was also on my way to officer candidate school. So I just been boarded over in Germany, where I was living at the time. And the officers said, hey, we want to make sure that this guy goes on and can be a lifer wearing the uniform as an officer. So happy Veterans Day to everybody out there. I want to continue to wear the uniform, salute the flag. But on May 17, 1994 at 5:30 in the afternoon, I misstepped a hurdle. I landed awkwardly. My leg hyperextended. That caused a disruption to the popliteal artery. 7 days later, I became an amputee. Chose an elective amputation. So you can imagine that. Devastating. Life is over as I knew it, or so I thought. My wife comes in, Alice. She says, you know what, John? We're going to get through this time together. It's just our new normal. And she really orchestrated kind of the undergirding of me to push forward to get into life. So you always hear me say and always use the term I've been using for over 25 years now, this new normal. And I know that during COVID, a lot of people have been using the term the new normal, but most have been using it as the term of a destination. You'll hear things like, well, when things get back to normal, I will ... Or, I guess this is just our new normal. So I guess I have to be satisfied with where I am. And I don't look at it that way. I look at the new normal as there is no prior point of reference. mean, who's lived through COVID before, right? So this is brand new. And normal is the everyday typical occurrence of a thought or an action. So the new normal, therefore, is not a destination. It's only a plateau by which we grow. And so I began growing with this new normal mindset and started swimming for physical therapy. I then, 27 months later, made the Paralympic swim team. So instead of going to the Olympic Games as a 400-meter hurdler, I went to the Paralympic Games as a member of the 4x100-meter relay team, freestyle relay team, and I also swam the 50-meter freestyle. I saw athletes running and jumping with artificial limbs at those games. I had a leg made for running, and 4 years later, I won the silver medal in the long jump over in Sydney, Australia, and I got the hardware to prove it right here. Boom, Sydney, Australia. And I came back from that and just started doing a lot of things. I started speaking business and developed a military support program for the United States Olympic Committee. So that's kind of gets us up to this point of today on why I started this program, this kind of podcast-ish live stream, because there's so many people I've run into and bumped into that are just amazing individuals, and they have so much gifted into my life that I really wanted to share their expertise with all of you. And today we have no exception. So who else is on? I want to make sure that you're sharing the stream with other individuals. So if you're out there and you can answer me this question right now, who is a former Obama worker in the White House that is just a global rock star for people with disabilities? So hey, thanks, Stacy. But we do have another one that's coming up with this inspirational moment as well. Put that in the chat box who you think that is, because I want to know. Because I think if you know who our guest is, you may have the answer. I may just give you a clue. So get a clue. And I just want to make sure that you are sharing this out so we have a lot of people. Who else do you need to know that needs to be here right now to hear this conversation? Bosses or other guests that you want to bring on. All right. So without further ado, I have to introduce to you another phenomenal guest that we have. So let me rock on with her bio here. She is the president, the CEO of the American Association for People with Disabilities. I serve with her because I'm on the board. In her role, she works to increase the political and economic power of people with disabilities. So that is, it's a rock star organization. If you have not heard about it, you need to Google it and find out more about this organization. Prior to this, she served as director of the City of Houston's Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities, where she advocated for the rights and needs of citizens with disabilities, served as a liaison between the mayor, city council, city departments, and other public and private entities on matters pertaining to people with disabilities in Houston, and established local and national partnerships to advance inclusion. And we're going to talk a little bit about all that what I just read there, because when Houston had, the big storm that happened and the hurricane that came through, she was like the go-to person working at a library to make things for people with disabilities in the community, because Houston hadn't thought about that to the degree that she needed to think about it for them. And then she's also the former senior associate director in the Obama White House of public engagement, where she managed the White House's engagement with the disability community and older Americans. Please welcome to life to our, I was going to say Life Renewal podcast, but that's another show. Please welcome to Hurdlers of Adversity, Inspires and Maximizers of Pivotal Moments, the one, the only, Maria Town.
Hi, John. Thank you so much for having me. Wow, I need to have you as my hype man wherever I go. That was incredible.
I gotta raise the roof on you. You have been such a wonderful friend and just kind of godsend to me. I remember when you came out to Colorado Springs and we went over to the Olympic Training Center. We had this great dialogue around people with disabilities, sports and disabilities, inclusivity. We had a lot of folks that were there that were kind of movers and shakers. And of course, you were leading the pack as you were working for the former president at the time. Tell us a little bit about American Association for People with Disabilities. What's this organization all about, and why is it so important to the community, not only disability community, but also our community as a collective as a whole?
Sure. Well, John, again, I want to just say thank you. And you have also been a great force in my life. It was wonderful to really connect 4 years ago. And, it was funny too, when I moved from the White House to Houston, adaptive sports, Paralympic sports became an even bigger factor in my life. And I would always, think of you and say like, oh yeah, John Register. And people would always say like, yes, John Register. So now I'm at AAPD and I couldn't be happier. The American Association of People with Disabilities is a national cross-disability civil rights organization that works to increase the economic and political power of people with disabilities across the United States. And so I do want to talk about why AAPD is important to the disability community. You notice I say that it's a cross-disability organization. And what that means is that we don't focus on a specific kind of disability experience or diagnosis. And this is not me saying that organizations that focus on things like blindness or cerebral palsy or, amputees aren't important. They're very important. But when we talk about all of the disabled people across the country, more than 61 million people with disabilities, we're talking about everything from cancer to cystic fibrosis. And so AAPD really tries to unite all of these people so that we can capitalize on our power as a movement. And that benefits our whole community because we know when you design programs, jobs, workplaces, housing, to really center people with disabilities, everyone benefits. One of the things that we talk about that I'm sure you know about, John, is the curb cut effect, right? Curb cuts were originally designed for people with mobility disabilities. And now, when we look at curb cuts, we see parents with baby strollers, busy travelers, maybe we saw this before COVID, but busy travelers with rolling luggage, people carrying groceries, all benefiting from curb cuts. Predictive text on your computer, right? Texting in general was originally developed for deaf people, and now I bet you prefer to text more than you like getting on the phone. And so AAPD works to promote solutions and policies that, again, make it possible for everyone to really fulfill their greatest potential.
Thank you for that answer. And that gives really great context. And I wanted to just touch a little bit, because you said something in there that, quite frankly, when I was introduced to the community, having an acquired disability later on in life, it fascinated me that there were these kind of silos that were out there. I first noticed it in sport because that's where I was coming from, right. and so like the blind sports organization was one organization. Then you had the cerebral palsy organization, and then you had the amputee organization, then you had the dwarf athletics, and there were all these groups that were just out there, and no one really was coming together. And I found that really interesting, especially when I was trying to build programming in a community where a child, a parent of a child, might want access to some type of sporting event. And instead of going to the entity that was right there, the swimming pool or the bike shop, they would try to build it themselves. And they get some really great organizations doing it that way as well. But as soon as one person that was not in the same disability mix kind of came in, they would start another organization. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was pulling, that's why I have gray hair and white hair right now. I was like, no, just get it going. And I think that's really, and so then like in definition, absolutely. And so then we're just talking earlier, because we were trying to figure out StreamYard actually has, what we're using right now, a caption ability for it. And we're really looking hard for that. And so I know we do it on YouTube. I placed it on YouTube for that reason alone, so that we can have the caption there. But in real time, we want to know. We want to be able to sign. We want to be able to do those things. And I'm not the greatest signer, but I need to have somebody that can kind of come on board with it to offer the solution for that as we talk about this. So kind of looking at these things, Maria, in your opinion, what are the greatest kind of missteps or the misconceptions that people might have of, as they look either outward, inward to this community? What are some of those misconceptions?
Well, so I think that there are quite a number of misconceptions that continue to really harm the disability community. One major misconception is that if you have a disability, you can't work. Sometimes, and it doesn't matter how professionally I'm dressed or how I conduct myself, I'm not asked, what do you do? I'm asked, do you work? Because people have this assumption, you can't see it right now, but I have cerebral palsy. And so when I'm out there walking around, I'm very visibly disabled. And, people with disabilities can and do and want to work. During some of the major protests in the disability rights movement, you'd see protest signs saying, we want to be taxpayers too. And I think particularly for people who acquire disabilities, because this stereotype is so entrenched in how we think, many people who acquire disabilities might think like, my life's over, I can't contribute anymore. And that's simply not true. So that's definitely one assumption that does a lot of harm that we just need to nip right in the bud.
Yeah, that brings us right to a great spot, because I want to talk a little bit more about that. Lynn saying it must be Mariatown. That was my question I asked earlier. She always because she knows how I roll. And there's been like talking about Deaf Nation in the house. What?
Yeah, Deaf Nation.
Yep. So it's fascinating to me. So I had Judy Heumann on here.
Did you see that the Black deaf community just created the sign name for Kamala Harris?
No, I did not.
Yeah. So in the deaf community, the community gives people sign names so that you don't have to finger spell their name every time you're talking about them. And so I can't do the sign name. I don't know sign language, but I did see it kind of announced last night. So we'll have to send people that information.
I gotta check that one out, because I hope it's not.
No. Although I wouldn't be mad at that.
That's great. No, I hadn't seen that, so I'm glad you pointed that out, because I would love to know that. It was interesting because a couple of weeks ago I had on Judy Heumann, right? So, and she was talking about kind of the flavor of the conversation of the misconceptions and maybe some of the fears that happen of people that maybe we hear. I don't know. I don't want to be around that person because I might catch what they have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So she was on Trevor Noah show, of course, and as I don't know if you saw that show, was
absolutely
hysterical. So Trevor said, well, Judy, me being from the able-bodied community, and Matt just kind of raised the dander on her head, because of the word, able-bodied, and goes to ableism, all those other things. And so after he finished, she said, well, Trevor, I really don't like the term able-bodied. I'd rather call you temporarily able. And then he said, what, are you threatening me? And it stopped him it stopped her dead in her tracks, because it gave her pause, because that's kind of just it, right? It's, am I going to become part of this community? And that always comes with a sense of loss,
right?
Really, until you become a member and you find out you really don't lose as much as you think that you're going to lose, right?
Yeah.
It's there's things you have to adapt to and do differently. How do you help people overcome that mental block when you hear an answer like, well, I'm really able-bodied, right? So kind of it's like almost like an elevation.
Yeah. So it depends on where people are. There might be people who have not had to really think about this before, and I think it's important for us as advocates to acknowledge that there is some grief that comes with acquiring a disability, and to respect that. but then to also say there will be some losses, but there will also be so many incredible gains.
Yes.
You gain a whole community and identity. You gain civil rights, the Americans with Disabilities Act. But one of the things that I always say is that disability means resilience. Disability means that you have survived. All of us will become disabled if we are lucky enough to live into old age. Aging is a privilege. And so even if you lose your sight, and that's how we talk about it, right? But even if your sight changes, even if your hearing changes, your mobility, your speech, it means you're still here.
Yeah.
And just thinking about that, right? Like I don't know, it gives me chills. So.
Yeah. I often find that, and I say it tongue in cheek a lot of times, but then I get really serious about it. That and there's several others, what I call from the military terminology, in the post-traumatic growth instead of the post-traumatic stress disorder. And the post-traumatic growth, I'm saying, I'm doing now more with one leg than I ever would have done with two.
Right.
And I've been so many more places. And I think it's our mindset of how we shift our mindset around how we show up. The other thing I want to chat with you about is I've been on this kick this whole week on power, status, and stewardship. Because we often hear there is right now with the president-elect Joe Biden and the vice president-elect Kamala Harris, that there's this power struggle. There's a transition of power that's happening, and I really, I think that's something that's kind of made up. and here's why I say that, because when I was serving in the military, it was really never about power as so much as I am being celebrated or being thanked for my stewardship of volunteering to serve the nation to protect its interest against all enemies, foreign and domestic, right? So there might be some things I have power access to, but I'm really being good steward. So I was challenging the news outlets, ABC, NBC, Fox, CBS, and CNN, and some of the anchors on them to really start shifting the language, because I think when we say we have a transition of power, it means I'm losing power. But if I say I'm having a transition of it's a transition of stewardship, that's a whole different way. I just need to be a good steward over what I've been entrusted with, because someone else owns it, right? It might be the democracy, it might be the people, however you might want to spin it, but it's for somebody else. When you look at that power status, and status being that of people that are in status positions usually want to demand higher, they want more power, but people in power only give greater status, right? So when you think about that terminology with people with disabilities, and the collective of AAPD, how then do people with disabilities really gain more power over the status that they have?
So that's a big question. And first, I want to acknowledge, I love this framing of stewardship, and it's something that is key to my own method of leadership. One of the things that drives me every day is being a steward of the community and a steward for civil rights. And that's been true since I was really in the White House. And I felt such an enormous amount of pressure in that role and in each subsequent role, because I was really the steward of the disability community in the White House. And I think the distinction that I would make is that stewardship does come with power, but to quote Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility.
Right.
I think in kind of public service roles, it's not power for power's sake. It is influence and power that's tied to a significant responsibility. And I knew that if I didn't do my very best, I would be letting so many people down, not just folks who could call me up and say, Maria, what did you do? But, people who I would never meet or never know. So I think in terms of the disability community, there are quite a few ways, and let's welcome my cat who has just joined us.
Yeah. What's your cat's name?
Her name is Grisabella.
Grisabella. Hello.
She came with that name, yeah. So one of the things that we can do is to speak up. The disability community for far too long was silenced. We were institutionalized. We were locked away in our homes. We were denied employment. We were denied all kinds of rights. We're still, if you receive SSI, still kind of denied the right to marry in some ways. And so one way is to speak out. I think, unfortunately, for many people with disabilities, we get this constant message of like, don't take up space, try to pass, try to appear as able-bodied as possible. And that's certainly a message that I received growing up. In my family, they did not stigmatize my disability, but they also didn't celebrate it. And so when you were referencing Judy's spot on the Trevor Noah show, it's not just that able-bodied people don't want to hang out with people with disabilities. Sometimes other disabled people don't want to hang out with people with disabilities because we're all trying so hard to appear normal. And we're afraid if we associate with those very visibly disabled people that it'll rub off on us. And one of the ways that I have come into my own power is through learning how to celebrate my disability and having disability pride and recognizing that disability is a huge part of my personhood. And in doing that, it gives people permission to do the same, which is another aspect of stewardship, right?
Right. Yeah, I think that is spot on. I have a humor. I'm not going to do it right now, but there's a humor story I always talk about with this guy that jumps out of the overhead bin and scares who is a double leg amputee. But the whole growth around this is my growth in the moment, because it's the first time I'm on a Paralympic team and I'm questioning my new teammates. Mm-hmm. Just like you were saying, is this going to rub off on me? Even though I'm an amputee already.
Right.
I'm like, and so that was exactly what you're saying. And so I'm on this plane and I realize when I see this guy jump out and scare the life out of this unsuspecting person who opens the overhead bin space up, I begin to think about my thoughts when I was in the gate waiting area where I wanted to be on this Olympic team and not the Paralympic team. Yeah. And I say, it looks like I'm going to have a lot more fun on the Paralympic team than I was going to have on the Olympic team. And so that's kind of this whole metamorphosis that's going on in my brain at the time. But despite all that, the third lesson I share with the audience of what I'm learning at this point in time is that I call the guy Tree. So I give people names, so it makes it a funnier story, right? So I call Tree and I say, Tree was showing up as his full, authentic self.
That's right.
Despite how I was showing up for him. And so it's oftentimes we'll place on other people what we believe they can or cannot do, which is based on what we believe we could or could not do if they were in their situation.
Exactly.
So we're trying to hold them back into that mold. And I think you just said that beautifully on that. So as we're thinking about this, you're really a mover and a shaker. And I want to know kind of some of the lessons that you learned in two instances, right? The first, and you can take it any way you want to go. I want to talk about, kind of lessons learned when you were in Houston. Mm-hmm. And was it Katrina that you were with, or was it
Harvey?
It was Harvey. Okay, so Harvey. So Hurricane Harvey. And then what you learned, from your days in the White House, on being the steward over this community, kind of in both of those scenarios.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the biggest lessons that I learned in Houston is that community, specifically disability communities saves lives. So Hurricane Harvey hit when I'd been in Houston for 6 months. And one of the things that made Hurricane Harvey a different kind of storm was that it didn't just hit and leave. It was like your, derelict cousin who stops by your house and says, "Can I stay one night?" and then sleeps on your couch for a month. Hurricane Harvey decided to hang out, and it just poured rain across the entire city. Yeah. And so what I did as soon as Harvey was coming was I created this community listserv of disability advocates across the city and across the state. And I would send them updates in real time, and they would check in with me in real time. And we began to have these daily calls where people networked resources. And unfortunately, even though I was working for government, government was much slower to respond than the community was. And I sort of played the role of community connector, which is a lot of what we do at AAPD, right? Convener, connector, catalyst. I was literally connecting the community and catalyzing these resources. And not only did I witness people pulling together material resources like wheelchairs and replacement durable medical equipment to save people's lives, but I also witnessed disabled people who were in trouble because of the storm becoming connected to disability community for the very first time. And I'll never forget Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson had survived a automobile accident, and he had fought very hard to save his legs in his recovery from that accident. Separately, he was also diabetic and blind, which is very, very common. Diabetes is one of the most frequent causes of blindness in the United States, and one of the biggest causes of blindness in Houston. So Mr. Johnson I think he was about 55, not very old, but he lived by himself and did not really have a disability identity. He reached out to us because his leg wraps, which helped him prevent lymphedema, had become contaminated with floodwater. And he was developing infections in his legs that he'd worked so hard to save. He couldn't tell us what kind of leg wraps he needed because he was blind. And so we had to send out, volunteers, all of whom were disabled people, to help figure out what he needed. And we were able to get him connected to blind groups like the Houston Council of the Blind and the Houston chapter of the NFB. And I remember him calling me one day saying, "Maria, this saved my life." Wow. Not just the kind of leg wrap intervention, but literally getting him connected to other disabled and blind people who could show him an example of what his life could be if he had resources and community. And that was really one of the biggest lessons that I took away from my experience in Houston. So often when we think about people with disabilities, we think of them as people who need help, who need assistance. And we don't recognize that disabled people are often able to provide some of the best insights and wisdom in these situations because we've lived it, right? Because we know it. And I'd always seen disabled people as agents of change, but I really saw it happen in Houston. So the other thing that was really important in Houston was that I had a mayor who was hugely supportive of the disability community, and that, we talk about how leadership on inclusion has to come from the top. But Houston, I saw that every day. One of the reasons I was able to do all that I was able to do during Harvey was because the mayor was just like, "What do you need? I'll get it for you." So, and then in the White House, I loved it when advocates were really effective, even if that made me uncomfortable and sometimes made me frustrated. For example, at the Obama White House, we would do these like West Wing weekly videos. They would come out on Friday, and they were these like short videos that showcased everything that had happened with the president that week. And I actually think they would come out like Friday night, but because they came out Friday night, they weren't captioned because that was like off hours for our captioners. And so every weekend I would wake up and the deaf and hard of hearing community would blow up my Twitter. I mean, blow it up. And I would just be like, okay. And so even though I wanted to be like, no, like, you know, we have a captioner, we just have to wait. Like, that's not actually fair. And so I was able to document all of these tweets and present them to basically the finance people in the White House and say, we need a new captioning contract. We need a captioning contract so that anything that's put out Friday night or over the weekend is captioned in real time. And that was able to happen. And it's because all of those deaf advocates were just like, nope, we are going to go make our voices heard. You know, that's also what I think about at AAPD. We have to recognize kind of when to advocate really strongly publicly and be this sort of squeaky wheel, and when to say like, hey, you've messed up. Let's work together to get better, you know?
That's phenomenal. I thought you were just going to tell me it was Leah Katz Hernandez who would just walk right into the print and just say, hey, 44, I need you to caption this for us, our community. And for those that don't know, Leah Katz Hernandez was the ROTUS of the White House. So the receptionist, and President Obama stole her from First Lady Obama because she was doing such a great job. And so when you go into the White House and you would be announced, she's the one, from the total deaf community that you had to engage with first. So what a powerful signal that sent. And it was really fascinating, you know, having been to the White House several times in several different administrations, both Republican and Democratic, to see just the changes that happened in it was just an atmosphere of fun and light. And even though hard work's getting done, but it was really powerful to see just the full rainbow of people inside.
That's
people
right.
with disabilities, African Americans, Hispanics. It was just like this. It was like the people's house was just blown up. It was great. It's a really fun atmosphere in that place right there. So I wanted to just pause for a second and give people a chance to chime in. If you have a question for Maria, just put in the chat box. I think I can see your comments that are going on right now. But she said something that she's a catalyst, and absolutely, Maria's a catalyst and a convener and a connector. So if you got any three of those words, convener, connector, catalyst for change, put that in the chat right now and tag Maria Town. Put Maria Town in there because she is just doing a great job. She's a rock star. She got her cat in the background and everything is happening. So put that in the chat. I want to see it. That she is a convener and a connector, catalyst for change. Tag her, tag APD, and we have Michelle Obama signed. Yes, absolutely right. Absolutely, for sure. That is great. And the president also has a new book coming out. So that's coming out. Fascinating to see that as well. So we want to make sure that we get plug 44 on that one. All right. So as we get ready, I know we're running, you know, kind of getting close to time. Say again.
John, I don't know if you saw in the Atlantic, the president published a section of his memoir that talks about the battle for the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, which, is once again hanging in the balance of the Supreme Court. But in the article, it talks about Ted Kennedy Jr., our board chair at AAPD, and how his life experience basically inspired his father to pursue the Affordable Care Act. So if anyone hasn't read the Atlantic article with the excerpt of President Obama's memoir, it's great, and we're very lucky to have Ted Kennedy Jr. as our board chair.
Yes, so that's actually we're in sync because that's exactly where I was going. I wasn't going to the Atlantic article. I was going to talk about, you know, why some of these policies that, because a lot of Americans, we see it from the outside, or we get it from a very, very political perspective, but
Mhm.
from like an apolitical perspective, what does it really mean to the disability community if some of these things that were rolled into the Affordable Care Act kind of go away? What does that do to the disability
Oh,
community?
it does a lot, and it does a lot of harm, to be specific. So before the ACA, insurance companies could discriminate if you had a pre-existing condition, and that means disability. So they could charge you more for your insurance if you had a pre-existing condition, or they could choose not to insure you at all. And it just it's hurtful. I mean, I was born this way, right? There is literally nothing I could have done that would mean that I wasn't disabled. And yet, until the ACA, I knew that in order to have health insurance, I would either have to be on benefits or have a job that provided really good health care. And that limits people's dreams.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I wouldn't have been able to, and I haven't done this, but if I'd wanted to, I wouldn't have been able to start my own business because I wouldn't have had health insurance, right? And that's one big thing that a lot of people don't think about. People with disabilities can be entrepreneurs now because of the Affordable Care Act. So one of the things that will change is that if the Affordable Care Act goes away, insurers can discriminate all over again. That means that they can apply lifetime caps. And so for premature babies who need operations, multiple operations before they're even a few months old, they can hit their lifetime cap before they've even been able to go home with their families. It means that essential health benefits like mental health therapy won't be covered. It means that Section 1557 will go away, and Section 1557 prohibits discrimination in healthcare. During COVID, one of the things that the disability community has been worried about is that as medical resources become strained, that hospitals will deny life-saving care to people with disabilities and older adults. And in fact, we've seen almost every state in the country establish a policy like this. The disability community has fought back really hard, and we have made a lot of progress, but that's in part because 1557, this section of the policy, exists, and that could all go away. One of the other things that will change is the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act created something called the Community First Choice Program. That helps people with disabilities live in our homes, in our communities, and not in nursing homes and group homes. Right now, more than 40% of all COVID deaths have occurred in nursing homes and other congregate settings. If the ACA is overturned, it's going to be even harder for people to live in their communities. It's going to be easier for them to have to live in nursing homes, and that means it'll be easier for them to die of COVID. Not to be really dire, but
I mean, because we don't get into the weeds like this, and and so we get the sound bites from whatever news source we're listening to, and then we make our decision based on those sound bites. We don't really look into the act and what it's actually done. And as we're moving more towards the rest of the world, which more countries, countries that are kind of first world country, I would say, they have healthcare,
nationalized healthcare, and
it's not it's they're looking at us like why would you even do that?
Right.
So it's kind of when I talk to my friends overseas, they're like, you guys I don't really understand y'all. So
right.
And that's more than the not, right? We still use the imperial system and not the metric system. We still it's kind of like we just
we still don't have paid maternity leave. We're one of the few developed nations that doesn't just offer that outright. I mean, there's so many things like that, So
yeah, I was kind of tongue in cheek and say, yeah, maybe y'all should come over and send a coalition over to the United States and to like we go to other countries, they need to come here and tell us why we should have these things and why we should be coming to join the rest of the world. So Lynn said something here. She says, "Thanks for being a catalyst in change." And the cat lover, yeah, she's the cat lover. So we got another cat lover that's out there. I'm really appreciating of you being on. What's I was looking at this, we saw President President-elect Joe Biden shout out the disability community in his remarks, and I don't know. I think a lot of people didn't catch that, right? I think we kind of went over because they're not listening for that, listening for other things. It definitely caught that, and so I really went to was that. I was thinking about you. I thought about Tony Coelho. I thought about, then you also mentioned Ted Kennedy Jr. and all the work you've been doing. So congratulations on getting that into script and making sure that's a hot button topic item for the administration. So that's really great work, and we keep holding their feet to the fire for that for sure. But I think it's a pretty easy lift on President President-elect Biden. So for the business community that's out there right now, what are some of your kind of closing thoughts, your closing remarks when it comes to hiring and retaining people with disabilities in the workplace?
People with disabilities are an asset to any workplace. And there are so many resources for employers to better understand what it means to not only hire, but accommodate employees with disabilities. I want to strongly recommend something called the Job Accommodation Network. They have all kinds of materials and resources that you can go to as an employer to just look up, like, what kinds of accommodations would someone with epilepsy need in order to be effective in the workplace? Or, what is real-time captioning? How does it work? Mm-hmm. It's a great resource. Sometimes a lot of employers are afraid to engage with people with disabilities because they're sort of afraid of what they don't know. Mm-hmm. And so, just like you would explore any kind of new topic, look at resources like Jan. One of the other things that I would like to recommend is something called the Getting to Equal report. It is a report that AAPD, Disability In, and Accenture collaborated on. And what it shows is that major companies that make a commitment to inclusion and hire people with disabilities outperform companies that don't. Like, there is a business case for hiring people with disabilities.
2-to-1.
Exactly.
The shareholder returns.
Yeah. And so, if you think, well, I don't know where to find people with disabilities, reach out to organizations like AAPD. There is a huge network of disability community organizations across the country. People with disabilities want to work. And if you have jobs, there are definitely people with disabilities who can fill them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I lied because right when I said that last question, Daryl Kirkland came in with one. I want to ask you this question because I think it's a good one that we can do, and then we'll wrap on this one. So Daryl says, other than acceptance of the heart, what are the current gaps that hinder the differently able, you can talk about that term if you want to, from being fully accepted in our social context? And how do we close it politically and or socially? Great question, Daryl.
Sure. Well, so I think one piece of it, and John, I don't know if you were poking me a little bit, but
I was poking you.
Is that we actually need to get comfortable using the word disabled and disability. When we say things like differently abled, that's basically us trying to talk over the idea of disability. And I really encourage people to use language of disability because it's the language of civil rights. It's the Americans with Disabilities Act. It is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And when you can claim disability, you can also claim your rights. But while I also recognize that people will have a wide variety of language that they're comfortable with, so we do need to meet people where they are. But I want people to understand that disability is not a bad word. And it's actually, again, it connects me to a community that I love in addition to my rights. It connects John and I together as friends and colleagues. You asked about politically. One of the things that I wish I knew that I don't is how many people with disabilities voted in the general election. the major exit polls at the New York Times, at any of the major media companies, don't ask about disability. And again, this reflects the thing that I mentioned earlier. We don't really ask because it's not something you're supposed to talk about. But guess what? This year, there were 38.3 million eligible voters with disabilities. I mean, it's a huge political force, and yet I can't tell you how many of them actually voted because the data is not there. One of the things that we need in order to continue to close those gaps socially and politically is better data about how people with disabilities are contributing to our communities and shaping our nation and shaping our worlds. This is a great question, and I could go on forever, but I will, I'll sort of have those two highlights. One, disability is not a bad word and we need to say it and embrace it. And two, we need data. And so if you are working as an employer and you want to understand the diversity of your team, are you asking questions about disability or accommodations? Do you have a disability employee resource group? Does every employee resource group get a budget for accessibility, because people with disabilities show up everywhere and we should be able to be our whole selves no matter where we are?
I love it. That was great. Daryl, thank you so much for that question, because there was so much packed in there. So I'm glad we were able to get in there. And I was poking her on the differently abled. So that was, it's something that we talk about, but we need to talk about in these forums because it's a real sticking point for people with disabilities that are kind of in the disability community. But as we said in the early parts of the show, it's all over the map, and people show up differently, and how we want to be treated and honored and respected can be different for other individuals. But I often will say I can no more disassociate myself from being a person with a disability as I can being a person of color. So it's just a part of who I am, and I can own that in that space just as I can any other thing that I'm in, husband, father, whatever you want. So if you really want to know what to call me John or JR. That's good.
But don't call you late for dinner.
Don't call late for dinner. So I want to thank Maria Town for being here. She is the CEO, Executive Director of the American Association for People with Disabilities. Thanks for being on. Hold the line real quick. Going to wrap the show up. And everybody give her some applause, give her some love, shout her out one more time. Talk about, what's the one thing, what's the insight that you took away? Put her in the chat box again. Tag her on LinkedIn. If you see her on YouTube, tag her there as well. And then I think we got our Facebook group, but we'll see how that goes. It's all private. Can't get in there unless I let you in. But if you do that, please chat, put her out there and tag her on all those posts, and tag the American Association for People with Disabilities as well. So thanks, Maria. I'm going to wrap the show up right now. I really appreciate you being on, and say blessings to the cat as well.
Thank you.
So that's our show, ladies and gentlemen. You have been on Hurdlers of Adversity, Inspirers and Maximizers of Pivotal Moments. I told you to stick around because we have some things that are coming up that it's just running, it's just pressing. I had a person call me today. She said to me, I can't believe how much you're out there. You're like one of the only speakers I see, professional speakers, that are really keep promoting. I said, well, of course, because these are tough times and we have to have some encouragement and encouraging words with some action steps that go around that as well. So the pandemic recovery, I want you to save the date, because on December 3rd, if you know anybody that's out there booking and hiring speakers for 2021, I'm going to do a JR Live, embrace your new normal now. Pandemic recovery remains elusive for meeting professionals. So if you are in charge of implementing change in your organization, if your leadership is looking to you for solutions, if you are calling on specialized speakers to inspire your organization, then this session is going to be for you. We're going to have a lot of fun. I may have some really hot talent to come on that may have been on American Idol, so you may not want to miss that. It's going to be on December the 3rd, 10 o'clock to 11:30. We're just going to have a great time, and I want to share some thoughts with you about what I've learned over this year in COVID and how we can take that into 2021. And just because we change the year doesn't necessarily mean we're changing because we got a second wave that is supposed to hit. we will see. Dr. Fauci says we got a vaccine coming. We'll see what's going on with that. This session is going to be for you. So remember, December 3rd, send me a DM and I will ensure that you get the registration, which is going to open up on Monday, November the 16th. So it's not open yet. Just want to make sure that you know, Monday, November 16th, we're going to open up the registration. It can sell out. I won't even say sell out because it's a free thing. It's not. It can get overrun. So I just want to make sure. If it does, I may do a second one, but for right now, I'm only doing one because I'm going to get out of Dodge. I'll tell you that in a second. All right, print copy of 10 Power Stories to Impact Any Leader, Journal Your Way to Leadership Success is almost ready to go to print. I've just looked at the edits and we're putting in the format right now. So not only do you get it on Kindle, you're going to get it in a print format along with a journal. So hopefully it'll be ready for some of your Christmas stuff, stocking stuffers. Really great thing for leaders to pick up this book. And then up next, join us for our Facebook group at www.facebook.com/groups/amputate-fear. We're having great conversations, dialogues in there. This video is always in there. I'm going to put all of them in the unit section so you can just kind of go back and see the unit section and rewatch these amazing videos. And then remember, my social media is going to be blacked out for the period between December 7th through December the 13th, because I'm getting out of Dodge to go write my second book. So you will you're not going to bug me. So I'm going to be out there doing that. So join the Facebook group live to hear more and learn more about how you can be a part of that journey and a part of that book process. So go over there, we'll get you involved. So finally, remember that you are the inspirations. Inspirations are the catalyst of motivation. Motivation in turn causes actions. Actions lead us to transformational results. And these results, they re-inspire us, or they allow other people who are watching the process to catch the vision. The mantra is always go forth and inspire your world, because go is your command, forth is your direction, inspire is your vocation. Because this is your DNA, only you can do this work in the world. It's your sphere of influence. We'll be back here next week at 3:12 on Hurdlers of Adversity, Inspirers and Maximizers of Pivotal Moments. I think Charlinda Scales will be our guest. She is Mud Sauce Queen, Air Force veteran, interviewed by Damon Johns. She's going to be a rock star as well. We want to thank once again Maria Town for being on with us today. Go forth, inspire your world, everybody. We'll see you here next week. Bye for now.